Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, February 18th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 193 days, the game against Michigan in 284 days. If you're planning your next event, you should make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. They were talking about the Ohio State tackles on the offensive side of the ball. We'll get to the defensive tackles in a little bit, but we're going to be continuing our series looking at a little bit of a spring positional preview with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. And Tony, I started writing down make sure I'm not forgetting anyone in terms of who they're losing from the tackle position. You only play 2 tackles at a time, I will remind you, Tony. The Buckeyes losing 5 tackles off of their team on the offensive tackles depth chart. Josh Simmons, Donovan Jackson, Josh Fryar, Zen Michalski, and George Fitzpatrick all leaving this year's team, and yet somehow it feels like they're not in bad shape there.
Well, and did you mention Miles Walker?
Oh, I didn't mention Miles Walker. 6. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. 6.
Yeah. It's a lot. And granted, only a few of them played, but still the guys everybody that you lose, you have to replace because you need that depth and they need to be ready and you need to start that development process. So losing all of those starting left tackles among that group, the experience that you lost, the versatility that you lost, and now you need to find somebody who is either as good as Josh Simmons or as good as Donovan Jackson. Is that a tall task? I'm not sure.
I mean, the way Josh Simmons and Donovan Jackson played this year, it's going to be a little bit of a tall task, but I think they may have done it. They went in the transfer portal and pulled out Ethan Onianwa. He was considered the top tackle in the portal by a lot of sources. Comes over from Rice. I saw over the weekend you were doing some deep dives on his game film over the last couple of years. What is Ohio State getting in Ethan Onianwa?
Well, right now they've got a big left tackle, 6'6", 345. So I wonder if they might cut that back a little. Remember how they did the same thing with Will Howard, different position, but they're like, hey, Will, can you lose 15 pounds? And maybe they'll do something like that with Ethan Onianwa, who last year was his first year starting at left tackle, and it went pretty well. He was a right tackle the 2 years prior to that, starting for Rice. And, he's played against big time programs against Texas in 2023, did pretty well. And, he's a powerful run blocker. Again, he's a big guy. So just getting around him is tough. And he's got all the experience that you could want, even at a lower level. It's still more experience than anybody else has on the team. So, yeah, it feels like he is going to be the left tackle, even though he's got more experience at right tackle. But his most recent experience was left tackle. And, remember when they brought in Josh Simmons, he started for a year at right tackle, and they came in and right away they were like, you're our left tackle. And so he kind of had to learn on the job, at least with Ethan Onianwa. He's not learning on the job, but he is it is a rise in the level of play that will be needed in the competition as well.
And I kind of have these guys split into 3 different tiers, and it's the 2 transfer guys, and it's the 2 guys who are returning as second-year players, and then it's the 2 guys that have been sort of discussed as first-year guys. So you're not going to hear the names Luke Montgomery or Tegra Shabola on this show. We're going to lump them in with the interior guys, just sort of know that, but also those guys might end up in this picture as well, is just sort of the unsaid portion of this show. But now I've said it, so now it's just a part of the show. So there you go. Now let's move on to Phillip Daniels, who is probably the lead candidate to be the starting right tackle this year. He's another transfer coming over from Minnesota.
Yeah, I think he started the last 4 or 5 games for the Gophers last year as a redshirt freshman. And I think 24/7 even had him as the number 5 offensive tackle in the portal. And that's pretty high praise for such a young guy. But that's a guy that has more experience than anybody else that Ohio State has on the existing roster other than Ethan Onianwa now. So, yeah, I think he is I don't know. You could call him the leader in the clubhouse, even though the clubhouse just opened up and the golf hasn't even started yet. So I think he, if not that you'd bet on these things, but he is, I think most people would expect him to be the starting right tackle. However, I would also say that he's still a young guy. And there are some other possibilities for Ohio State that we can get into, but I don't think he's as sure a thing as Ethan Onianwa, but also he's more experienced. He's got more experience than anybody else that he's going to be competing with. So that is going to merit some attention as well.
And we just watched Ohio State go through an entire college football playoff run, rotating 3 guards like it was a basketball team. So, what's your level of confidence that they're not going to just rotate 3 tackles at some point this season? Like, I don't know that I can say, like, no, why would you think they would do that? They've shown that they can do it. They will do it. They can make it work. So, you want to tell me that they're going to rotate the 3 guards that they did this year, and then sometimes the one who's not playing is going to kick out and be the right tackle? Like, yeah, sure, man, whatever. We'll see. This is all the fun stuff we get to figure out during spring ball and then possibly after that. But one of the things I'm really interested in looking at during spring ball is the 2 second-year tackles. Deontae Armstrong, just to be clear, Deontae is the tackle, Devontae is the guard. But Deontae Armstrong and Ian Moore, and Moore was someone who came on he came on like a freight train at the end of the year, where I think one of the reasons George Fitzpatrick hit the portal was Ian Moore was behind George Fitzpatrick, and then all of a sudden Ian Moore was not behind George Fitzpatrick. And to be playing right tackle, even in garbage time, in the college football playoff, which he did during that Tennessee game, that's like that's a real marker for this is a watch this space. This guy might be a dude in the near future.
Yeah, and losing 2 tackles during the season like they did with Josh Simmons and Zen Michalski kind of just moved everybody up. So it got him more reps, and which not a surprise, but everybody who got more reps last year on the offensive line got better for it. For whatever reason, those reps got there, whether it was illness or injuries, they made the most of them. And he's another guy to be able to work his way up into the number 2 right tackle. So yeah, if you're the number 2 right tackle as a true freshman, whether that is, it's not just happenstance. It's not just by default. They could have put somebody else there, and he was able to get that job by the end of the season. So he comes in with some really good experience. And the thing that people need to remember is the second team offensive line goes against the first team defensive line a lot. And so he was going against some really talented defensive ends, as you might imagine. So he was, the whole drinking through a fire hose last year, like that was kind of what he was doing. And now he's better for it. And I really think he's going to be able to compete for a starting job. Now, that might be similar to past competitions like we've seen before, where it's like maybe in another year, like maybe in a different year, this would be you. But because the competition was just a little bit higher, then it's this guy. But I really think he's going to be able to compete. Now, can he win it? He'll have 30, 40 odd practices between now and the first game to get that figured out. But I don't think he's going to go quietly in this competition.
No, and this is one where if there's a legitimate competition going all the way through spring and fall, and it's because Ian Moore is really pushing for playing time, that's a good thing. We just saw how many tackles you might need in a season. So having another guy who is getting reps with the ones potentially, or certainly, as you mentioned, even just getting reps against the ones, that's going to really be a beneficial thing for this program long term. The 2 guys who are the true freshmen, this is a really interesting case study in, you can look at the positions that they have on the recruiting profiles, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's where they're going to play in the college level, because Carter Lowe was listed as a tackle, Jayvon McFadden was listed as an interior offensive line, and then when Ryan Day shared his thoughts on some of the true freshmen coming in, that's not necessarily where they're going to be lining up when they start their careers.
Yeah, and first I just want to mention Deontae Armstrong. We were just talking about, who at St. Ed's was really just a run-heavy offense. So there's some time it takes to become a college offensive tackle after being a run-heavy high school offensive tackle. The whole pass blocking thing takes some time, but he's got all kinds of athleticism, and I know they're still very high on him. In terms of McFadden and Carter Lowe, yeah, Ryan Day, when he was running through the class back in December on the signing day, said, well, Jayvon McFadden, he's a tackle. We'll start him at tackle. Carter Lowe can play tackle or guard. And really, if you're a guy that can play tackle or guard, you're going to find out if they can play tackle first. And then it's just, you start them outside and you keep moving them inside and until they find a home. But yeah, Carter Lowe, one of the top tackles in the nation. McFadden, really, really athletic. So those 2 guys are a nice base. And if you can get a starting tackle out of one of those guys, fantastic. If you can get a starting tackle out of both of those guys, you've hit the jackpot, because maybe this is an off-season exercise in terms of how many years in a recruiting class does Ohio State land 2 starting tackles or 2 starting, offensive linemen? And if in a small class like this, have they done it? That would be a pretty good hit rate with just 3 guys in the class. Now that's always going to be with the transfer portal now, they can make up for it. But they've got tons of ability. So they're both here on campus, and I believe they are, and getting ready to go. So we'll see what kind of move they can make, because it's a pretty young group overall. So there's going to be some opportunities.
It's a young group. It's also just we just named 6 guys here, and none of them had been on campus before about 12 months ago. Like, those are the 2 guys who we just talked about as being true freshmen this past season. Those are the old heads in the tackle group, at least of the 6 names we just discussed. And again, there's lots of possibilities in terms of, hey, you kick a Luke Montgomery out to tackle, or you move a Tigger Shabola out to tackle, or what, Austin Sierveld is someone else who they've, sort of kicked the tires on out there at various times. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But that is going to be one of the really, really interesting spring position battles to watch, in terms of what did Ohio State really get in the transfer portal, and how are those guys holding up against what should be a pretty good defensive line. But then also, how are those younger guys developing? How far away are the true freshman guys? That's always, just go ahead and pencil in the true freshman guys are probably not going to play a lot this year. That's okay. That's normal. That is not at all a bad marker for an offensive lineman in terms of long-term projection, not playing as a true freshman. If they do, that's generally a huge thumbs up, like in the case of Ian Moore, as we mentioned earlier. But yeah, the true freshman playing on the offensive line is absolutely the exception and not the norm. So that will be one of the things we're watching this spring as we cover Ohio State spring football, and whatever the end of the spring football thing looks like, they're still sort of figuring that stuff out. It's going to be an eventful spring at Ohio State and with the Ohio State football program, and it will be an eventful spring for all of us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. We got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there as well to make you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.